Sunday, November 17th, 1963. The bright Georgia sun beams its rays down on the city of Augusta. Many of the citizens awake like they have every morning before, going about the plans of the day. For most, it is to head to the state-of-the-art motorplex that is the Augusta International Raceway. They're going to watch the NASCAR Grand National Series take on a challenge never before presented to them. For years, they had raced on the half-mile dirt track on the same complex, but for the first time, they will be racing on the weaving 3-mile road course just south of the Oval. It was considered one of the fastest in the country, and also one of the most cutting-edge. This would be the first running of the Augusta 510, an event that drew 36 of the biggest racing stars to humble Augusta, Georgia. It was the second race of the 1964 Grand National season, and green flag was set to start at noon with a time limit of 5 p.m. Many didn't know if the Grand National cars could turn 500 miles of the track within 5 hours. And with sunset at 5:25 that night, it was easier to set a hard cut for distance and time than to leave it vague for the drivers. The green flag was taken just after noon, as pole sitter Fred Lorenzen would lead the field of 36 into turn 1. Teammate Fireball Roberts would take the early lead by the completion of the first lap, and Lorenzen would fall back, eventually having his engine let go 12 laps into the race. Roberts would eventually be passed by David Pearson, who, after leading for a bit, would have his engine let go. This would give way to Junior Johnson and Richard Petty, before both of them would suffer the same mechanical misfortune. By the finish, only 7 drivers managed to nurse their cars home without major issues. The first was race winner Fireball Roberts, taking his 33rd career victory in Grand National competition. It solidified himself 6th place all-time in wins. Behind him was his teammate, the young Dave MacDonald. It was only his second career top 5 in the NASCAR Top Division, but the young driver was building a credible reputation, both in stock cars and in sports car racing across America. Third was Billy Wade, driving the number 5 Dodge for Cotton Owens. He had run part-time last year, and was preparing for another season, looking for more success. This time he was teammates with young David Pearson, both of them tabbed as being hot and rising stars in the sport. And fourth was the reigning back-to-back champion, Joe Weatherly. It was not uncommon to see Weatherly at the front, but it was strange to see him without his iconic number 8. He was driving the number 26, simply because team owner Bud Moore could not afford to enter into this event. It was something that Weatherly had done over the last 2 years, piecing together rides to keep his championship hopes alive. This was not uncommon, nor was it for him to again run at the front, making his bid for his 3rd consecutive championship better than ever. And 5th was the last driver besides Joe Weatherly to win a championship, Ned Jarrett. He was a veteran of the series, and had done almost all there was to do in NASCAR. He still wanted a Daytona 500, but more importantly, another championship as well. This good run was a great start to achieve both of those goals in 1964, keeping up with championship rival Joe Weatherly. 6th was Jimmy Pardue, a young driver for Cliff Stewart, who had just captured 2 career victories. Now with 1964 on the horizon, a top 5 points run was right in his sights, and potentially a breakout year as well. And in 7th place was Larry Thomas, the underdog of the series. Building a respectful career, he was still looking for win number 1. But year over year, he had shown progress, slowly ascending through the ranks in Cup. He, like all 7 of these men, represented the past, present, and future of what the NASCAR Grand National Series would look like, all hoping to build on their past success as they moved into 1964. After a break for Christmas, the 1964 season officially kicked off at the Riverside International Raceway in California. 5 of the 7 drivers would take to the road course, led by Dave MacDonald, starting 5th, and the number 14 Bill Strope Mercury. And 14th would be Fireball Roberts, 15th Billy Wade, 16th Joe Weatherly, and 21st Ned Jarrett. Many NASCAR Grand National West drivers would also run during this race, but break down early. With the race passing by lap 80, Weatherly, running in his Bud Moore 8, rides comfortably in the top half of the field. He's chipping off laps in what is a torturous 500-mile road course event, and Joe, Heading towards turn 6, a sharp, hard-braking 90-degree corner, he lifted like he'd done every time before into that corner. However, the car continued to accelerate. His throttle was hung wide open, and the brake pedal was doing nothing to stop the runaway car. Joe needed to think quick, and he turned hard right into the tires on the inside of the corner. It grabbed the car and turned it slightly, to make it so the car would not make impact head-on with the wall. Instead, the car would slap driver's side first off the concrete wall. It continued to roll forward for a bit, and then eventually came to a stop. In a matter of 5 seconds, the reigning, defending, back-to-back NASCAR Grand National Champion was killed. One of the most iconic drivers of his time, and well-respected, was gone. Weatherly became the first reigning champion to die in NASCAR history, and also the first and only to die while leading the championship points. For the 4 other drivers from Augusta in that race, none of them would lead throughout the day, as Dan Gurney would go on to win the event, leading 142 of 185 laps. Fireball would get 3rd, Jarrett 5th, Wade 13th, and Dave MacDonald would get involved in an incident, finishing 24th. As teams left Riverside on that January day, many acknowledged that was possibly one of the darkest, if not the worst day, in the young sport's history. A month after the passing of Joe Weatherly was NASCAR's biggest race, the Daytona 500. Bud Moore had retired the number 8 he had run for so long, never to be run again under his ownership. He instead entered the car numbered 1, along with the 01 as well. He hired Billy Wade to take on the duties of the 1 car, and Johnny Rutherford to drive the alternate 01. Wade would come home 6th in the Daytona 500, running 3 laps off the pace of race winner Richard Petty. Petty would celebrate victory over runner-up Jimmy Pardue, who put together an incredible speed weeks, being the only man within 2 laps of the race winner. One of the top rookies in the 500 was Dave MacDonald, finishing 10th, in between 2 former Daytona 500 winners in Junior Johnson and Tiny Lund. Ned Jarrett would get involved in an incident with Johnny Rutherford and finish 27th. He would come up short once again in the series' biggest race, and at 37th was 1962 Daytona 500 winner Fireball Roberts, completing only 7 laps at a track he had dominated as of late. He had won 7 times on the oval across his career, nearly triple the amount of anyone else. But the 500 wasn't his bread and butter. It was the 400-mile summer race where he made his living, winning that event 3 times, and going for 3 in a row this summer. March 1st, 1964. Sports cars are taking to the Augusta International Raceway, and Dave MacDonald, with his new Shelby American team, has taken to the road course once again. Dave was on a hot streak. After winning Athlete of the Month from the Helms Athletic Foundation in October of 1963, a time of the year in which football seemingly dominated the award, it built the aura of his burgeoning legacy like a wildfire. On that day in Augusta, he dominated the event, winning at an average speed 11 miles an hour faster than what Fireball had done last fall. The performance would coax legendary motorsports reporter Chris Economaki into writing that, quote, Dave MacDonald just stamped himself as one of today's road racing greats. In mid-April of 1964 at the Occoneechee Speedway in Hillsborough, North Carolina, the first ever Joe Weatherly 150 would be run, a tribute to the fallen champion. 28 drivers would enter the event, with only 9 finishing. David Pearson would dominate and win, with Dick Hutcherson coming home second. Third, ahead of Ralph Earnhardt, was Larry Thomas, a career best for him up to that point, and a signal that perhaps the 36 team was getting closer than ever to a victory. Over the rest of April, Ned Jarrett would get on a hot streak, winning 2 days later at Piedmont, then again 2 days later at Columbia Speedway. That Sunday at the Gwen Staley 400, he would finish second to Fred Lorenzen, to before capping off April with a 4th place finish at Martinsville. On the first day of May 1964, Leroy Yarborough would get his first career victory in NASCAR. He would lead 63 laps, but only after the dominant car, Jimmy Pardue, would have a rear end go. Pardue had dominated the race from the pole, having drivers like Buddy Baker, Richard Petty, Cale Yarborough, and David Pearson 5 to 10 laps down from him. The only car he did beat was Ned Jarrett, who had his engine let go just 10 laps prior. It sunk Ned in points, as his season continued to be feast or famine for him. 2 days later, Dave MacDonald would duel at Laguna Seca with Jim Hall and Roger Penske. Whilst not winning, he was standing atop the USRRC standings. He was building great momentum for the event of his life, the 1964 Indianapolis 500. It was pegged to be his first start in the event, and while having limited oval experience and even more limited open wheel experience, many pointed to him as a dark horse. On Saturday, May 9th, Fireball Roberts would run the Rebel 300, completing a Homamoody 1-2 finish. Ned Jarrett would seal up a solid rebound of 4th place, in between Junior Johnson and Jimmy Pardue. The next day, on the 10th, Dave MacDonald would once again win in Kent, Washington. Since he was tied in points with Jim Hall, the two would take a victory lap together, as the series would go on break, preparing for that year's Indy 500. NASCAR was also preparing for one of their biggest races, the World 600. It was to be run a week prior to the 500 on the 24th. Ned Jarrett would generate considerable momentum heading into the race, winning 2 of the last 3 races before the 600, and finishing 3rd in the race he didn't win. Sunday, May 24th, 1964. The fanfare of 66,000 in attendance swell at Charlotte Motor Speedway. As many in Fast Nation looked on at pole sitter Jimmy Pardue, it was not an unfamiliar spot for him, as he had been on the pole many a times. What was unfamiliar was a spotlight that shined on him, being potentially the brightest of his career. In a time where a high car number was considered bad luck, many wondered why Pardue ran such a high car number. 54 was relatively rare across all of motorsports. But for Jimmy, it was a dedication to a show he was a fan of. The NBC sitcom Car 54, Where Are You? A show that followed the lives of 2 incompetent officers in New York City, driving Patrol Car 54. The show had lasted 60 episodes and aired between Walt Disney's Wonder World of Color and Bonanza. The theme song was particularly well known, as in more modern culture it is known for Nintendo parodying it. They used it nearly 30 years later to promote its video game Mario Bros. And while the main theme of the video game dominates culture nowadays, the initial commercial used to advertise for that game was the classic Car 54 Where Are You theme song. To double down on his reference to the show, he had even put on the driver door above the number 54 the quote, "Here I am." On that May day in 1964, few were asking where Car 54 was, as it took the lead in the entry of Turn 1. As the race fired off, Ned Jarrett and Junior Johnson would be battling just inside the top 10. Fireball Roberts, who had started just behind them, would run up on the two. And right before he would get there to add to the battle, the two would make contact and lose control. Roberts would spin trying to avoid the accident, slamming backwards into the backstretch inside wall. The car from the impact flipped, and the fuel tank would explode. As the car engulfed itself in an inferno, Roberts saw Ned and Junior get free from their cars. Fireball was close friends with Ned, and seeing his friend, he screamed for him to help him from his car. Ned sprinted across the track and yanked the badly burned and gasping for air Roberts from the destroyed Ford. Safety workers had worried that he had gotten an allergic reaction from inhaling the fire repellent, but were unaware of the fact that Roberts was having an asthmatic attack. He was transported to the hospital, where he'd be tended to for his countless burns and breathing issues. Pardue, in the race after leading 33 laps, would fall back before eventually having his engine let go. slotting him in the 24th. Another underdog would claim the victory. Jim Paschal for Petty Enterprises would win over Richard Petty. Billy Wade for Bud Moore would finish 5th. A great run for the reeling team. But, as many celebrated in victory lane and packed up, one of NASCAR's biggest stars sat in hospital, many wondering when Fireball would get back into a race car. This was the day of Dave MacDonald's life. Since signing the 2-year contract for this ride nearly a year ago, the anticipation for his first 500 was at its peak. Car owner Mickey Thompson was also anxious, but not in the same way as MacDonald. His team had been in a swarm of controversy over the last couple months, due to his erratic car design. In 1963, it designed a car to run on 12-inch tires, to which drivers said the car drove like they were roller skating around the racetrack. It was cutting edge, perhaps too close to the edge. Experienced driver Graham Hill denied driving the car after testing it, citing its incredibly poor handling. Worry set in for Thompson when in 1964, USAC made a rule mandating a minimum tire size of 15 inches. Forced to swap to those tires only worsened the handling of the car. And whilst MacDonald was a rookie, Mickey additionally hired veteran Maston Gregory to teach his young driver. He also had a third car with driver Dwayne Carter. And the month of May kicked off with all three wrecking their cars. Gregory would quit the team due to how bad the cars were driving, and he was replaced with Eddie Johnson halfway through the month. As the team continued to be in disarray, Thompson quickly focused on trying to get all three of his cars as fast as possible, just to get them into the show. Due to this, they never practiced with a full fuel tank, something that in the end did help Dave qualify 14th for his first 500. His efforts did not come unnoticed, as during Carb Day, Jim Clark became somewhat fascinated with the car, noticing how much MacDonald was fighting his machine through the corners. He pulled in behind Dave and followed him down pit lane, stopping him while he was getting out of his car. He told him one thing: to get out of the car and walk away. MacDonald was stunned. Why would a veteran driver tell him to walk away from his dream? Whilst the statement stuck with Dave, he knew he had no other option, and this late into the month, he wasn't going to get an opportunity to run in this year's 500. Being a lifelong dream, he decided to stay with the car and run that year's race. As the pace car pulled onto the racetrack, it was the first time a full fuel load was in the car. As he took the green flag, the excess fuel only worsened the handling of the machine. He immediately lost 2 positions as the car was borderline uncontrollable. But suddenly, as it got up to speed, the car steadied itself. And he screamed by Johnny Rutherford, passed by Eddie Sachs, scaring both of them with his erratic driving. Many thought that he was either going to crash or win the race. And as he flew up on Jim Hurtubise, he began to try and make a move. However, Jim was also trying to pass the driver of Walt Hagskren. MacDonald would lose control trying to avoid hitting Hurtubise, spinning and going backwards into the inside wall between turn 3 and 4. The fuel tank would erupt into an inferno and shot the car back up the track. Eddie Sachs had nowhere to go and struck MacDonald. What structure that was left out of the fuel tank burst, and the fire got even larger. Sachs was dead, and the first red flag in the history of the Indy 500 was shown to the field. MacDonald would be transported to Indianapolis Methodist as cleanup continued. A disgusted and embarrassed Mickey Thompson called in his only other car in the race, Eddie Johnson, and told him to get out of the car. Mickey would never run a car in the race again, and 2 hours later, Dave MacDonald would pass due to his injuries. It was a gut-wrenching blow for nearly all of motorsports in America. A young star and a current star, both taken in the same wreck. A day after the death of Dave MacDonald, and a week after his friend Fireball Roberts was severely burned, Ned Jarrett would win at New Asheville Speedway. It would give him momentum into the Dixie 500, where he would win over Richard Petty. As Ned continued to run, Roberts would continue to fight in the hospital. Over the month of June, Ned would win 3 times, but on Tuesday, June 30th, Roberts would contract pneumonia. He quickly slipped into a coma. On the Thursday before the event Fireball had won the previous 2 years, and hoping to go 3 in a row in, he would pass away from pneumonia, leaving behind a massive hole in not just his team Holman Moody, but NASCAR as a sport. He looked to have a career in television after his driving career, but sadly, he never got the chance. July 4th, 1964. As race fans come to the Daytona International Speedway, the Holman Moody team looked to honor Fireball Roberts by winning the event. However, that effort took a hit when their now top driver, Fred Lorenzen, would crash with Paul Goldsmith in the 50-mile qualifying race. It would badly damage their cars, and while narrowly escaping death, both men would be credited with second to last and last place finishes for the race. Jimmy Pardue would back up his good run in the 500 with a 3rd place, being the only man on the lead lap behind dueling A.J. Foyt and Bobby Isaac. The 2 men would swap for the lead between each other 15 times during the final 120 miles of the event, and it would come down to a last lap battle between the 2 of them.
Moving up to pass a slower car, the white flag is out, 1 lap to go. The leader is still Bobby Isaac. Well, if Foyt's going to make a move, it's going to have to be soon, and Paul Goldsmith up there in 4th position is between Foyt and Isaac, and this will complicate Foyt's problem. Foyt will probably try to get a draft down that back stretch. Let's see if he can do it. And Buck Baker will try to make the same maneuver. Bobby Isaac, the leader. Here's Foyt moving to the inside. Can he make it? He's even. He's ahead. Foyt is the leader. Just a few feet ahead of Bobby Isaac. Paul Goldsmith high to the outside in a fight for 4th. Now let's see if Isaac can move out and pass Foyt as they come for the finish line. This is going to be an almost photo finish. Coming down for the last lap, Isaac to the outside, pulling up alongside Foyt. They're coming to the finish line. And the race is over and Foyt is the winner. The checkered flag out for A.J. Foyt, the winner ahead of Bobby Isaac by just 4 feet. And Paul Goldsmith and Buck Baker were in a photo finish for 4th and 5th. Jimmy Pardue in car number 54 followed in 3rd, and what a race this has been.
The following Friday at Old Bridge Stadium in New Jersey, NASCAR would run the Fireball Roberts 200. On the pole was Billy Wade, the first of his career, and with David Pearson, Richard Petty, and Ned Jarrett behind him, he would lead the field to the green. He would stay out front for 60 laps, en route to his first career victory. It was a big moment for not only Wade, but the Budmore crew together. It was the first time they had won since losing Joe Weatherly, and the moment resonated deeply with both he and Wade. Ned Jarrett would end up second in the race, paying tribute to his close friend, and Jimmy Pardue would get another top 5 finish. 2 days later at Bridgehampton Raceway, Wade would again win, this time on the road course. He would do so after battling David Pearson all day, and would end up pulling away by 20 seconds. The following Wednesday at the 1/5 mile in Islip, New York, Wade would again win, leading 205 of 300 laps, and beating Ned Jarrett. And lastly, they would head up to Watkins Glen that Sunday on the 19th. Wade would win 4 in a row, all of which were his first 4 career victories, a feat never accomplished before or since. Wade was finally paying off on being the 1963 Rookie of the Year, and the Houston, Texas native was certifying himself as a top racing star. In the 52nd race of the 1964 season, Larry Thomas would grab his best career 2nd place finish. He'd be 3 laps behind David Pearson, and ahead of Buck Baker and Jimmy Pardue. Thomas in 1964 had put together a very promising season. Whilst not winning, he had taken a very low-budget team to great places, and his reward was the 19 car for Herman Bean, a car vacated recently by Cale Yarborough, who had moved to the Holman Moody team, filling the vacancy of Fireball Roberts. Thomas had finished top 10 in every race he'd run in the car, hoping that a win was potentially on the horizon. Tuesday, September 22nd, 1964. Goodyear is conducting a tire test at the Charlotte Motor Speedway, and pole sitter from the World 600, Jimmy Pardue, is there. He's turning laps to help Goodyear better understand their tire for the National 400 that is coming up this week. As the driver would turn laps around the 1.5-mile racetrack, the car would suddenly lose control, sliding and nailing the outside guardrail. The impact was devastating, and he'd be taken to the local hospital. 2 hours after the incident, his wife would finally be by his side, and 1 minute later, he'd pass away. Nicknamed Gentleman Jim, he was considered one of the nicest and most approachable people in the garage. His car was iconic amongst fans, and his death left a hole in the shape of a rising star with charisma and capabilities behind the wheel nearly unmatched. The 54 team would not enter the next race that Sunday at Martinsville, an event won by Fred Lorenzen, who would lead 493 of 500 laps. Instead, they would return at the track that claimed Pardue in Charlotte, the National 400, hiring new driver Larry Thomas. They moved to the car number 36, retiring the number that Pardue had died in. The car started 7th, but eventually overheated, finishing 20th. The following race was back at the Augusta Speedway, this time on the now paved half-mile oval. They would finish 3rd, crashing with 2 to go. And in the last race in 1964, they finished 5th, with Ned Jarrett winning the season finale at Jacksonville. Richard Petty would win his first title, and the season had finally come to an end. As rule changes caused mass controversy in the sport, Billy Wade planned another season with Bud Moore. They headed to Daytona in January, prepping with a tire test. However, he would blow a tire heading into turn 1, slamming the wall and killing him instantly. The wreck happened just 2 weeks shy of the anniversary of Joe Weatherly's accident. And amidst the controversy of Hemi engines in NASCAR and with the boycott, Moore would take a massive step back from racing entirely, barely entering a car for the rest of that season. Bud would even consider quitting racing altogether, but his wife convinced him to eventually come back. However, his team would never be the same. About 3 weeks later, in the early morning of January 25th, 1965, a man by the name of George Washington Hollis was traveling southbound on Interstate 75. He was commuting home from his job as a watchman at the Tifton College in Georgia. Suddenly, he heard what he thought was a bolt of lightning, and the car jolted violently forward. He looked to see that another vehicle had rammed him from behind. The car quickly veered over the median out of control and then the oncoming lanes. It would hit the guardrail on the other side of the road before vaulting over the barrier and falling down a 35-foot embankment. When the police got to the car, they found it was a brand new Plymouth, upside down and destroyed. Inside, they identified the driver as Larry Thomas, dead at 28 years of age. He had been driving to a tire test in Atlanta, not to drive, but to watch. His plans for 1965 were somewhat unknown due to the team he drives for being Plymouth and the manufacturer boycotting the sport. Larry was an underdog, and many were excited to see what he could do in 1965 with a new team, maybe finally getting that first career victory. Instead, he left behind a promising career and a successful mechanic business. November 14th, 1965. the annual Georgia Cracker 300 at the Augusta Speedway. The season opener for the 1966 season. Running on the half-mile oval instead of the road course, only 7 drivers would finish within 5 laps of the winner, Richard Petty. Petty himself would win from the pole after leading 132 laps. The eventual King of NASCAR would come up short of winning the 1966 title that year, but he would go on to win the 1967 championship, along with 5 more, before the end of his career in 1992. He would have 200 wins by that point, and a career that lasted over 35 years. A legacy many consider completely untouchable. Bobby Isaac would finish second, on the cusp of a breakout season for himself as well. He would go on to win 37 races in his career, along with the 1970 championship. Additionally, he would go on to have success outside of NASCAR with world speed record runs, setting 28 official records at the Bonneville Salt Flats in 1971. Isaac would eventually pass away of a heart attack in 1977, at the age of 45. Third place, Ned Jarrett would only ever run 20 more NASCAR races before retiring after Ford would pull out of NASCAR. He'd be the reigning champion after 1965, and the last living member of the original Augusta 7 from 1963, ending his career at the age of 34 before pursuing television, becoming one of the most iconic broadcasters in NASCAR history. However, he would never set foot in a race car again. Jim Paschal would finish 4th, and continue to race on for another decade, ending his nearly quarter-century career with 25 wins, and being one of the most underrated drivers of his era. He won iconic races like the World 600, and drove for a plethora of car owners from 1949 to 1972. 5th place finisher Roy Main would never win a cup race, and enjoy a lengthy racing career. He would also be given a minor role in the Elvis movie Speedway, and step away from racing after 15 seasons, enjoying a long career outside of stock cars. 6th place David Pearson would go on to win the 1966 championship, along with 2 more in his career. He and Richard Petty would be the only 2 drivers up to modern day to reach 100 or more victories, and the rivalry would write stories that would last for generations. And in 7th, in the 7 car, after starting 7th, was Bobby Johns, who with already 2 career victories would go on to enjoy a lengthy career into the early 70s. Bobby would then go on to enjoy a successful career outside of racing, all the way till his passing in 2016. A legacy is written with actions, and not the presumptive motions of the unknown future. We will never know truly what these 6 unrealized stars could have had in their careers, and the nightmare of what if will forever haunt their legacies. Let it be to always celebrate the actions of a person's life, and not the speculation. For we all run from that nightmare, the forever dooming thought of what could have been.